Covers halftime live Los Angeles Chargers, Kansas City Chiefs, Thursday night football, and it is a back and forth between which stream is quickest. That seems to be the prevailing dominant chat theme as everybody is trying to say that they're falling behind on the Amazon Prime stream. The NFL Plus stream is quicker. Not so much of a problem up in Canada. We've got Amazon Prime on TSN, so the broadcast appears to be about 9 or 10 seconds behind the next gen stats live feed where you see all the little buttons running around on that site. So there's obviously still a delay, but what I'm interested to see is if this gets reduced as the season goes on, and then if Apple actually wins the Sunday ticket stream and we have to deal with this and these hiccups for every single game on a Sunday, what does that look like? So questions that we have to worry about later tonight. The focus is obviously here on the Chargers Chiefs first half, as well as what we might see in the second half. Chargers a 3-point lead. So far, the game is crawling to a halt as the pace really died out in the latter part of the first half. And we will pull up the halftime lives here on Spank Odds, and we can see where some of these numbers are opening up. So we're seeing FanDuel at 1.5, which seems to be the consensus number across the board, unless you're looking specifically at DraftKings, which has gone to the key number of 3, total hovering around 26.5. This is probably the more difficult halftime that I've had to do so far this season, game number 4. The first 3 I was pretty clear cut on. This one is a tricky back and forth. So I think as we talk this out, we'll ultimately get to the spot where we can figure out what the best angle might be here, as we see DraftKings still probably expecting a wave of rec money coming in on the Chiefs, and perhaps that's the side we end up on. But let's talk this through. So what we're seeing from the Chargers so far offensively, I think is surprising, because Joe Lombardi at least showing a willingness to change his tendencies. Last season, Justin Herbert on first and second down was the 22nd rated quarterback in terms of EPA per play. And when it came to third and fourth down, he was number 1 in the league by a mile. And it wasn't a knock on Justin Herbert. It was a knock on Joe Lombardi and the conservative play calling that he had to deal with early on in the down sequence throughout almost the entire season. And last week, again, we saw it get very conservative in the second half, and the Chargers kind of crawled to a halt as well. And so in this game, it's actually been quite different. We've seen Lombardi allow Herbert to be very aggressive, and I wonder how that's going to apply in the second half, and if we see it, especially if the Chargers are hanging on to a lead. The number that really stands out to me, though, is obviously Keenan Allen is not here for the LA Chargers in the offense. And what that's led to is Justin Herbert throwing into a tight window. So that is a window where he's targeting a receiver, where the nearest defender is within 1 yard of the receiver, which he is targeting. Herbert's done that on 33% of passes in the first half. And so you might be watching this game and say, well, the Kansas City Chiefs defense, not so good. Maybe the secondary, not as great as we think it is with Spagnuolo, but they've actually been playing really tight coverage. So much so, again, that 1 out of every 3 throws for Herbert, he had 17, went into tight coverage. And so I think that's sort of the symptom of not having Keenan Allen within this offense. And what does that look like as we continue on in the second half? To me, coverage-wise, this game really reminds me of the Chiefs-Bengals game last year, where the Bengals were able to rattle off a ton of big plays, but all of those plays were tight windows. It was PI. It was defensive holding that really moved the Chargers down the field. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing from the Chargers offense that I think is really interesting. And I'm going to put producer Mick on the spot here to pull up some player props from FanDuel. Again, I slipped these in. We're not going to make them like the bet of the half, but I want to point out something with Josh Palmer. He kind of came to life on the last drive, but in terms of routes run per drop back, him and Mike Williams have run 17 routes. And so that's tops for the team because Herbert's had 17 pass attempts. Palmer is out there running a route every single drop back. So he's at 39.5 yards. He has 20 right now. So it's putting him at 19.5 for the second half. Mike Williams, on the other hand, a much bigger number. He's at 84 so far, and his prop number is much bigger. And so you have 2 guys out there as wide receiver number 1 and 2 running the same number of routes, Eventually, Kansas City has to find a way to help Fenton match up with Williams. And that's going to be probably when we see Josh Palmer again get out in the open. But he's been targeted 5 times. 3 of them were misses by Herbert. And then 2 of them on the last drive went for a big gain. So keep an eye on Josh Palmer and his second half receiving yard total, 39.5 total adjusted for the game. On the Chiefs side, I think we're finally seeing what they have to deal with and what they'll likely have to deal with as the season progresses. So the blitz rate that we saw the Cardinals implement in week number 1 was extremely high. It's the most we've ever seen Patrick Mahomes blitz. That's not the case so far in this game. The Chargers have been able to generate pressure with their front 4, and it's been quite effective, but they haven't been blitzing less than 20% so far on all Patrick Mahomes dropbacks. So the blitz rate is way down, and it's just forcing Mahomes to move the football down the field a couple yards at a time. This is what the Chiefs have worked on all offseason. This is what they're going to find from opposing defenses basically throughout the entire year. But something that really has stood out to me as well is, again, we talked about the tight window throws for Justin Herbert. For Patrick Mahomes, the number is 0. So he's been able to find the open guy very effectively, spread it out. The one thing that's making it look a little different is he's held the ball for almost 3 seconds per throw. And if you put that in the context of the entire league, that's the biggest number. You rarely see quarterbacks over 3 seconds. And so what it's telling me is that this Chargers defense playing very soft, everyone's back. It's really making Mahomes think. They're kind of working the ball downfield slowly and getting into that rhythm. And so if we go back to the second half odds and see what we can look at, and if anything has moved, as we get producer Brady now on the move to get the odds screen pulled up. But in general, everything is still sitting at 1.5, as well as that total still at 26.5. There was a lot of money from respected bettors that came in on the under, as that was bet up to 55 before the game. You can see why. Both of these teams forced to move the football down the field quite slowly, and we're seeing the Chargers and their offense kind of stretched out. I would be inclined to look at the under, but I'm more so inclined to look at the Chiefs in this spot at -1.5, because I think the Chargers offensively, they're really stretched to who they can throw to and what they're going to work with. And quite frankly, in watching Herbert, there's been a handful of throws where he's missed open guys. I'm sure everyone watching the stream has seen it as well. It's been different for the Chargers offense, and obviously without Keenan Allen, it's going to be. But that, to me, is really standing out. And I know that Mahomes and the Chiefs have kind of got off to a bit of a slower start, but this defense is forcing that. I'm sort of trusting Andy Reid that the second half adjustments are going to come. There's just so many more options that the Chiefs can look to and stretch that out. So I'm going to swerve the shorter under, and I'll go Chiefs -1.5 for the second half as my bet. I think offensively, they have more options to work with. They're going to be able to make the adjustments here at the second half. And while the pace of the game might not necessarily tick up, I think we're going to be able to see them move the football more effectively than we will with the Chargers in the second half. I think they're going to find a way at home to come back and get back in this game and get potentially the cover for the full game as well, which closed -4. So interesting first half. Two teams that know each other well, some tendencies going back and forth. But to me, there's more guys open. There's more space for KC. And I think the Chargers get limited without Allen in the second half as the Chiefs find a way to quiet down Mike Williams. So that'll do it for me here on this Thursday night. The bet is Chiefs second half -1.5. Appreciate everybody for stopping by and joining. We will be back with you again Sunday Night Football.